Hello, hello, and welcome, everybody. It's really good to have you. This evening, we are joined by two very special guests, Fiona Compton from Know Your Caribbean and Professor Sonjah Stanley Niaah, the director of the Center for Reparation Research.
Fiona.
Hi, Brian.
Hey,
Just
hey,
trying
what's
to
up?
answer my phone. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you. You're looking radiant as always with the colorful head tie and everything.
Well, you know that they are, so I had to at least try and look somewhat presentable. But yes, good to be here.
It is good to have you here for this conversation about uh, how you can honor your ancestors today.
Mm-hmm.
Today is March 25th, and for those who don't know, March 25th is the UN International Day of Remembrance for the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. That's the language that the UN uses to commemorate this day. How have you been spending March 25th in remembrance of your ancestors so far?
Um, I think in the lead up, it's caused me to reflect a lot because and to think about the different things that we do where we don't realize that we're actually doing remembrance. And I'm also starting to think a little bit more about like my own spiritual connections because when they talk about you get called to certain things you don't know why,
Yeah.
or called to certain places and you don't know why, or you feel something. And it caused me to start to think about my Caribbean landscape. So the different places that I'm like, I think, there was maybe it's over a year now we did the live with Sean in Trinidad, and he was talking about we don't realize that when we're walking around the Caribbean, we are walking around
Yeah.
plantations.
Yeah.
Like, yes, yeah, you may not see the plantation house or the old windmill or this or that. And we're walking over grave sites because, most of our ancestors were buried in unmarked graves. We walk places where, many difficult things happened. And we are just walking blindly around these spaces. And it really caused me to reflect a little bit, in terms of how, and sometimes we may go a place and feel like, boy, they have Jumbie there or something.
Mm,
But then it could just be, them trying to talk to you,
well,
them trying to
you
reach
know
out
what?
to you.
I I'm really interested in hearing how your thoughts on this coincide with our second special guest tonight,
Mm-hmm.
whose name, as I mentioned before, is Professor Sonjah Stanley Niaah, the director of the Center for Reparation Research, who is herself a scholar, but also a cultural anthropologist in her own upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So she's here, and I'm really glad to introduce you guys and
Me
introduce
too.
everyone else to her again. So she's just going to join us here. And hi, Sonjah. How are you?
Hi, Brian. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Sonia. Good to see you.
Yes, same here.
It's been a long time, Sonjah, since we've had a chat like this. For
A
those of
long
us in the
time.
comments, we had a chat at midday today in honor of March 25th, Remembrance Day. But I feel, first of all, very privileged to have such heavy hitters in this conversation as yourselves. And I'm eager to hear what the thoughts we have to share are. I would love for this to be a really free-flowing conversation, guys. It is our final conversation, like I said, in this week of
Mhm.
repair that has been commemorating our ancestors who resisted chattel slavery and fought to overthrow this system in the Caribbean. And as we remember them, something that the Repair campaign is asking everyone in the comments to do is to sign in solidarity with the
Mhm.
calls for reparation. We really want to identify the reparation advocates wherever they are across the Caribbean, across the Caribbean diaspora, global Africa. Even if you are not of African descent, the word solidarity implies that you can stand in solidarity with the
Mhm.
calls for reparation, acknowledging that this system has exploited the Caribbean region and left those of us, those nations here, and the people in these nations disadvantaged. And the right to repair and reparation is something that we are advocating for, and we want you to
Mhm.
join in solidarity. So if that's you, the link is in bio at Repair Campaign. You can also comment repair in the comments, and our system will automatically direct message you the link to sign in solidarity. So please do comment repair, sign of solidarity as we get going into this fascinating conversation with these amazing guests that we have this evening. So thanks for my little housekeeping matters there. I wanna toss it over to both of you. The first idea that we want to explore, right, in this Remembrance Day is, what does it mean to honor our ancestors? That's a very, very broad question, but
Okay.
like,
Well,
I think we really want to get the personal take.
I think I'll jump in real quick just to piggyback up what you were just saying, because we can see, like, especially on social media, most Caribbean people are for reparations and for repair and all of that. Of course, there are some cynics, but in terms of us taking action, and I think that's one of the greatest ways of honoring and remembrance is actually taking action. So, even looking at the signing in solidarity, people think, oh yeah, this thing must have like millions of signatures. And people are saying that yes, reparations now and repair and stuff like that, but it just takes like 30 seconds just to sign your name, because these are things that we're going to be presenting to the wider bodies to show that we are united as a Caribbean region. I think a lot of us, when you look at, when we talk about reparations, the naysayers are, oh well, Caribbean people are all disorganized and we're not unified, and politicians just going to keep the money, and like, and when I hear that, I think, okay, well, this is exactly what they want. They want us to be fractured, and they want us to not even have trust in each other. And when you're looking at things like the CARICOM 10-point plan and all of these things, where they have been amazing historians, economists, so many people have put together like a very comprehensive plan where it's not people thinking that we're just going to go and waste the money. When we're looking at it, has been so placed in such an incredible structure in response to the legacies of the things that we have survived as Caribbean people. So for me, if we're talking about honoring remembrance, what would they want us to do for them? You know, what would they want for us? How would they want to see their descendants living? And if we have an opportunity to do something to right all the things that we've had to be subjected to them, to me, that's one of the top on the list.
One of the things I want to begin, first of all, just,
Mm.
big up everybody who is on this live joining us this evening. I want to begin, as I reflected on what I really wanted to talk about.
Mm.
I want to begin with the thought of who is an ancestor. And Fiona, you said, a lot of Caribbean people, maybe even we can stretch it, a majority of Caribbean people agree with this question of reparation. We know deep down that we're due something, that we've been victims of something terrible. But some of us are absolutely in ambivalence about one, who we
Yeah.
are and who our ancestors
Yeah.
are. And that's, we understand there's a break that happened between the time we came from the continent, those who were transported, and those who are here today, who are descendants of African
Mm.
people. Many
Mm.
of us, some of us don't even consider ourselves to be African
Mm.
descendants. That's not something we
Mhm.
consider in our daily lives. And I wanted to start with who is an ancestor. And for me, this evening, at this hour in Jamaica, where I sit on a plantation, a former
Mm.
plantation, I want to remind people that when we talk about ancestors, we're talking about our own family members. For me, the closest person in my family to have passed, my father, in terms of my bloodline, my ancestry begins with my father, my grandfather, my grandmother, and my great grandmother, my great grandfather. Many of us, we don't think of it like that.
Mm.
We think of some other people way back in time who we don't know. So it's kind of abstract. We just can't relate to this concept of the ancestors. So I wanted to kind of bring it home. Our ancestors are the people who have been close to us. And if you trace it all the way back, it's your grandmother, your great, 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 great grandmother and grandfather. So if we establish that, it's easy to think of honoring them because
Mm.
we are not separated from them. There is no separation in that bloodline. And one of the most important things to understand is that there are very simple things that we can do, beyond the institutionalized, sort of structural, the everyday things that people do. Pour a little of them drink on the floor
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
libation. Some people do that and they don't even understand where that comes from. But deep down, them see them mother do it, them see them father do
Mhm.
it, them see them cousin do it, so they do it.
Yes.
It's the kind of food, the traditions, the black cake every Christmas. You know, there are things we do and we don't even recognize it, but
Mhm.
we must be conscious now of who we are and know that there are direct everyday actions, what I call everyday rituals that we perform in honor of our ancestors.
Mm. I love that. The everyday rituals. I think that's something that we were definitely talking about. I think so many people think about, when they think about ritual, they think about, okay, if it's drumming, dance, but even it could be even some of, just like you said, some of the smallest things, and even looking at like how we talk to each other. Like there's so many words that we have that we think are Jamaican words or Trini words or St. Lucian words are actually words that come from the continent. So we even speaking in their mother tongue when we sing certain words. So all of those things, even recognize when I say the word obia, obia is not, it's not English, is it? Right? So I'm
Not at all.
speaking in
Not at all. Igbo
exactly,
word. That's an Igbo
exactly,
word. And
exactly. So
we at the Center for Reparation Research, we've been trying to bring those concepts home because a lot of us, we were born in this context, this African diasporic space, and the criminalization of Obi is a classic example. We
yes.
haven't gone back to read about why that happened,
Hmm.
how that happened, and how it is that that was deliberately an attempt to remove us from our spiritual practices and as African descended people.
Yes.
So,
In clear, when you look at the laws and the reason why, it
absolutely.
is one of the clearest examples of how they put in those laws to remove us from that.
So, and if you think about it, the Obia law,
Mm.
I go back all the way to 1688 when drums and horns were banned.
Yes,
In
yes,
Jamaica, in
yes,
Trinidad,
yes,
there
yes.
there are laws
Skits.
against the assembly of enslaved persons. There are
Mm-hmm.
lunacy laws, there are medical laws, all kinds of things that were there to prevent us from having the kind of life, particularly in terms of celebration. So by the time, jazz and blues and calypso and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things were emerging at the turn of the 19th century, there was all kind of and even before that, we can go before that, but let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about the turn of the 19th century. I think most people can relate to calypso and the steel drum and so on. There is a lot of legislation just to suppress the celebration that we were
Yep,
involved in, you know?
yep.
And so carnival, dance hall, all of the performance practices that we see across the African diaspora, many of them were surviving suppression, deliberate
Mm-hmm.
attempts at suppression enshrined in law. So how do we
But
honor
even
our ancestors? Some of us whine our bati, point our toe,
that's
as
right.
Dr. Lansonet Stein says, and gyrate.
But I think a lot of people feel that though. I think a lot of people do feel that when they whine in. I think especially in certain spaces, you can tell when as if like almost you could say the spirit take them when they in that when they
Mhm.
in that space. But I think like also too things like Junkanoo, when you're speaking about masquerade and carnival, like I remember some of my favorites, some of my favorite things, like writings I found in some of my research, and you may have come across it, was this Moravian priest in like the 1812 or so, and you're talking about he couldn't get no sleep
Yes,
because
man.
the heathen Negroes were
Lots of those
drumming.
accounts.
Yes, exactly. And
Hope
I
Waddell.
love.
Hope Waddell was one of the
Mhm.
missionaries who I write
Right,
about in my book, Dance Hall
right.
from Slave Ship to Ghetto.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the neighbors who were rioting and perverting their freedoms
Hmm.
and disturbing their neighbors and doing all kinds of things. And the
I love
good,
it.
good and well natured people were being disturbed. Listen, I that's the sum
I
total
love that.
of the work I did, and that's actually what brought me into a
Mm.
conversation about repair.
Mm,
Because I said,
Mm.
where there's no space made even for celebration. Imagine you're born, you see your family members born. You can't celebrate their birth, you can't celebrate their death, you
Yes.
can't celebrate marriage. Celebration is a fundamental part of
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Mm.
So if you're trying to tell people, ordinary people, you dehumanize them to the point where they can't even celebrate.
Yeah.
Something is wrong with that, man. Something is wrong with that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Sonjah, because that's something that I think is crucially missing in this conversation of remembering, for example, the victims of slavery. The emotion behind that is very heavy. It's very
Mm.
negative. It's very dark. But I think that we have an opportunity to flip the script and remember them in their joy and in their celebration and their freedom, particularly because it was banned systematically. It was intentionally suppressed and erased to the point of because they knew that in these gatherings, in these spaces where our ancestors can collectively express their joy, that there was power there, and they
Mm.
couldn't stand for that power to actually come to its full fruition, right? Because
Manifest.
we know what that would mean.
Hmm.
But now we've seen that power come to its full fruition in the way that carnival is so big. Reggae music has taken over the
Yep.
world in the way
Yeah.
that, as you mentioned, jazz and blues is the most fundamental piece of music that has come from Black culture, that has pervaded every aspect of the music industry, right, globally. So I think there's so much power that we have to flip the script from this dark and gloomy idea of we're
Mm.
talking about slaves and slave,
Yeah.
right? But instead to remember them in their celebration and their power and their joy through music. I'm biased because I'm a musician, and so I love the concept of how like my own natural inclination towards music is built into my DNA. And where does that come from, right? Even you
Mm.
touched on it before when you want
Absolutely.
wind your back and point it to, as you said, to your roots. But I think in just the way that you that I sing and that I express myself and that we move when we hear certain like rhythms on the drum in dancehall and reggae,
Mm.
all of that is baked into who we are and
Hmm.
is a tribute to our ancestral lineage. And I think for
Absolutely.
me, that's one of the ways I like to honor my ancestors through music. I don't know what you
Absolutely.
guys think of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
imagine that as they worked the plantations, they were singing, as they were in the fields, as they were through the house, they were singing. There were things that they had, whether it was spiritual, whether sacred or secular music. They had those to keep them, in tune with life, to support their own being
Mm.
as they were in this struggle. And so, we've talked about we've talked about a little food, we've talked about the performance, we've talked about so there are several ways in which, but most of all, I think this is one of the serious things for me at least, is we have to begin, and many of us are on that journey, but some of us are not. We have to
Mm.
educate ourselves. Fiona, you have been a classic example of how it is, one educates oneself and begins also to use the platforms available to educate others.
Yeah.
I do it in a
Mm.
classroom. I do it in a public way as well. I speak all over the world, in terms of my own research and so on. It is fundamental that each one teach one. Fundamental.
Agreed.
Each one teach one.
Agreed. I think in my own journey, because people think like I'm not an academically trained historian. I'm self, everything has been under my own self motivation. I when I went to university, I studied film and photography. I'm an artist by professional trade. And it was my journey through history was I find out something and I'm like, but how come I didn't know that? And I felt that cheated. I felt cheated. And then I felt like, no, if I feel that way, I know there's a lot of people that feel the same way I do. And that's just how it started. And then it's just been a rabbit hole of a complete, and I really do feel like for me on my own personal journey, and I know you felt this too, Sonjah, it's like they just whisper in your ear. No, you need to tell them about this one.
Yes, man.
They just
Know what
tell
you
you, they
mean?
just tell you
Yes,
things.
yes.
Yes.
Stop,
So
stop right there. Stop right there. Let me
yes.
tell you the story. Let me tell you about that. Listen, when I was doing my PhD, which was about, well, let me tell you, my book is called Dance Hall from Slave Ship to Ghetto. You know what was happening on that slave ship, right?
Yes.
They were being forced
Yes.
to dance to stay
Mm-hmm.
alive. And I
Yes.
discovered in the work of Camel Brathwaite, many of
Mm-hmm.
us would know the name Camel Brathwaite,
Mm-hmm.
historian, poet, and a number of others who mentioned the limbo dance. It was one
Exactly.
of those that was recorded in the slave ship logs, right? And listen, when I was writing my PhD, I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with all kind of things they were whispering in my ears. And now, when people talk to me about that book, and I go back and I look in that book, I
Mm-hmm.
know I tell them I did not write that book.
Ooh.
Some yes. Sometimes I will write something and I say, not me that write that. I
Absolutely.
yes, 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 yes. Oh my God. So yes, yes, yes. And it's you don't
Serious
realize it at the
business.
time.
But you know, let's abstract from that a little bit now.
Mm.
What is it that allows you and allows me to be able to listen and hear when our ancestors speak to us?
Okay,
You have
Mm.
to
let's go there.
attune your ear. You have to trust. You have to know that they are a part of your higher self talking to you.
Mm.
Mm,
Some people alienate themselves from that. You know
I
what I
think I
mean?
think I think when it's sometimes I don't always immediately recognize that it's happening. Sometimes it's in retrospect. Like you said, you sometimes you go back in a book, you're like, nah, not me that write that. But I think it's the willingness to follow that feeling and emotion when it comes and to allow it to enter into you. And then whatever comes after that, whether you realize the next day or whatever. But I think it's to allow us, we're very distracted. And I think, like you said, in terms of our separation from accepting, because of course we have a very colonial way of thinking about spirituality. And because even I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I said to her, I said, sometimes I feel so happy. I feel like I'm going to die just now because I'm not deserving of such happiness. She said, well, my girl, that's the colonial way of thinking. That's a very super white supremacist way of thinking that a woman like you is not deserving of such happiness. And I
mm,
said, yes. I said, even me too, all up in my history, have my own decolonizing of my mind and my spirituality to do. So even if we have these moments, we have to, like you said, to have that awareness to accept and attune our ears, to listen to the voices and to allow that guidance or whatever it is that they want to say to us. So I think that's a really good way. A really one, as you say, one of the most important ways of remembrance is allowing ourselves to
wow.
open up ourselves to listen.
You've also said something just now, which is really crucial because it's also, when you begin to reflect on what about that colonial experience that we're constantly a part of now in just the spaces we occupy. That colonial
Mm.
thing is just there. It's like a shroud.
Yep.
It's to be able to reflect on the repair that we have to do for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's so crucial that we're not fully formed. We're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna forget sometimes. We're gonna not know some things, and it's to be able to reflect and to be able to say, "Oh yeah, let me put that thought, that kind of thinking away.
Mhm.
Let me step into a new way of
Mhm.
thinking. Let me step into new ways of seeing something." That's being open-minded. And if we go back to Don Miguel Ruiz's work on the agreements, the four agreements or the fifth agreement.
I love this.
The fifth agreement is listening,
Yeah,
being open-minded.
you're speaking to my soul, Sonjah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize it, but so what I'm hearing is this idea of decolonizing the mind as part
Mhm.
of the process of honoring our ancestors. This repairing the colonial mentalities that we don't even realize that we've been conditioned to adopt just because we've been assimilated into societies where it's the norm. But yet, as part of the work, as part of the privilege in remembering our ancestors, is this process of listening to and allowing an open-minded sense of adopting new ways of thinking, which are outside of these colonial. Yeah, wow. Even the thoughts on
Yeah.
wellness on it, which is something that we've spoken
Man,
about.
listen, we have to
Mhm.
have a separate chat just about that.
It's true.
Well, give us a short version.
It's
I
true.
can you imagine we live in societies, Fiona, where people come from all over the world for wellness. We are trained, we are oriented to serve
Hmm.
them, but
Yes.
never have that conversation for ourselves.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Where that come from?
Yes.
All these
Because I mean, it's
Yep.
pushing us
and
on
that's
them
the
cruise
thing.
ships.
It's and so it's not to say we don't have the exposure or the experience to know what it's like for to see us people being looked after, or what it's like to have a soft life, all of those things, or to enjoy the good things, and then we don't apply that for ourselves. Sometimes you see activities happen, you say, oh, that's white people thing,
Hmm.
or like healthy food, that's white people food. And it's just looking at how we do not apply these methods of
So,
self-care
so,
for
so
ourselves.
can you imagine if, as African descended people, we decided tomorrow, tonight, to
Mm.
just step into an understanding of what wellness means for us?
What would that look like?
Because we have to let
Ooh.
go of that guilt, though. I think in terms of resting, looking after ourselves, prioritizing our health, I think guilt is a thing that we are struggling with, that we're not
But that's
deserving
what
of
you
those things.
talked about earlier. That's what you
Mm-hmm.
talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You don't deserve this thing. It's white people thing. No, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same. It's the same thing. Why we don't deserve it? Let's all step into an understanding of what wellness means for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that word deserve comes up because
absolutely.
even when you think of the fight for repair and reparation, there's almost the same word deserve comes into the conversation there. When you talk about the idea of reparation as a privilege, or is it a right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we, is, let's say, access to education something that maybe those in certain spaces will take for granted, but those of us in the Caribbean see it as a privilege to be able to get a good education? Or rather, should we think of it as something that we deserve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, boy. Somebody
I
just
mean,
commented, don't use the good China.
oh, yeah.
Exactly. That
Yes,
entire concept. See, my
yes,
my my Tricia, thank you.
Buy the
I don't know
couch
if
and
it's
never
Tricia or
sit
Mia
on
from
it.
the CRR. Don't use the
yes,
good China.
yes.
It's
It
Same
so
is so
thing.
true.
true.
Put it down
Save
for
it for
some
what?
other person coming to our house.
Yes,
Yeah.
but not for the people who live in the house. It's very true. Very, absolutely very true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms
Thank you for
of,
that.
it's true. But in terms of one of the questions that I had was for you, Sonjah. Um, when you have you ever walked in certain places or spaces where you felt something and you don't know why, or been pulled to something and you don't know why?
Is why she want to ask me that, Brian.
Because she knows you got something to
Is
preach on.
all listen, you're trying to open up a whole heap of things.
Well, the can
Sorry.
of worms is already open, so let's spill them out.
So I think I'm unusual in that sense, Fiona. I am very, 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 very attuned with my ancestors,
Mm,
down to the kind of clothes I wear every day.
Really?
okay.
Yes, man.
Tell me some more about that.
So let me give you an example. I had a presentation to do a few weeks ago about a maroon institute, and I went into my I said to I put on my clothes. I said I was told I was to wear white. That's what I mean, Fiona.
Mm, yeah.
I listen to what I am to do.
Mm,
I listen to what I am to wear. I
mm,
listen to what I am to say.
mm,
I respond in the world in that way. So
Mm-hmm.
I had this presentation to do, and I said, okay, this white dress, I think I want to wear a shawl around my neck. I
Mm-hmm.
heard shawl. And I
Mm-hmm.
went into my container, my bag with shawls, and I found a shawl with Nanny of the Maroons painted on
Hey.
it to go do my
Yeah.
maroon
Yes.
presentation.
Mm.
Yes. Yes.
You understand
Yes.
what I'm saying? When I stuck my hand
Yes.
in there, that's what came up. I
Yes.
forgot I had
Yes.
it.
Mm.
Yes.
I didn't go in there for that.
Yes.
They sent me for that. You understand?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's how
Yes.
I
Yes.
live my
that's
life every day.
amazing.
And
So for
I think,
me,
mm, no,
for
go
me,
ahead, go ahead.
honoring my ancestors is so integrally. It's like my ancestors are like right here when my you see my hand on my cheek.
Mm,
There's no separation.
mm.
They are like right here. That's
It's
why
I
I
had a
started by talking about my father because
right.
I don't see
They're
it
right
as
there.
too far from me.
Yes. Yes. I at a moment I went to Guadeloupe Carnival this year, and Guadeloupe Carnival is a very spiritual carnival. Certain spaces, and there is a lot of references to spiritual practices and ancestors in their carnival, from the burning of the incense to the use of the whip. But the whip is not just to speak about the legacy of slavery, but it is, they said it is to wake up the earth and to clear away bad spirits, and the type of incenses and certain practices and drum beats they use. It's a lot of thing incorporating ancestral memory. And they said even their dedication to carnival, they said they must, because they did all through COVID, and they said because that is the one time of year where they truly honor their ancestors, they venerate their heritage, and they're dancing alongside them. And that's the thing that they do every year to make the ancestors happy. And so when I was there, because the drumming, you drumming and you marching, it's not just dancing, but you marching with a certain purpose, and it's all live drumming, conch shell, shack shack. The costumes are like natural fibers, body paint, bush, like, so it's very earthy, very grounded. But
Mhm,
when I was there, I felt there was three people behind me. And
mhm,
I just opened my hands out because I said, you know what? The rhythm that I'm feeling, the way that I want to move my body, the things I'm feeling is them that give me that. And they were dancing right next to me. So I just did that. I just put my hands out on either side to hold their hands so they could dance with me and I could dance with them. And I think when we think about in terms of remembering, right? When if it's drumming, how we comb our hair, how we laugh, how you like to roast your breadfruit, the fact that you love saltfish so much. Because, when I find things in some of the records of how and say people would barter saltfish because, saltfish was something that was revered, right? It was the rare protein to get and thing, and how we love up saltfish so much. Just having those little bits of awareness of the things that really light up your soul, your spirit, is those things, those are the things that come from them. So that's how I felt. I'm like, why is Carnival making me feel this way? I'm like, because they're right there next to me.
yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so many of us walk around without that knowledge, without that in touchness with
Mm,
our ancestors. And we have to each one teach one. And as a matter of fact, it was Roddy Roy who said it a while ago. Big up
mm,
Roddy.
In the
You
comments.
you you we are often, just clouded in this Christian moral ethic that says, oh, no, 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 that is not Christian, that is
mm,
not
Yeah,
godly.
yeah.
mm.
But yet they all worship Jesus, who is an ancestor.
Mm.
Well, exactly that. Exactly
They
that.
understand
And
it in that way, but not when we talk about our African ancestors and celebrating
what?
them.
How do
That's a
you
good
think
point.
we as Caribbean people can navigate around our relationship with Christianity? Whether you people who want to tap into their African spiritual practices, but I think Christianity has done, even for those of us who don't go to church, who haven't set foot in church long time, who say fire upon the church, I still think we still carry so much of the church in our mindset anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because of course religion and spirituality two different things. But how best you think we can navigate around our relationship with Christianity?
You know,
Good
Fiona, I'm
question.
glad you asked that. I've come a long way because I used to be very hostile. Even just, not too long ago, just kind of hostile in my mind. Even using words like God. Those words have caused so much problems in the world. So many wars fought over just, whose concept of God, who are the
Yeah.
chosen people, how are we gonna navigate this Christian thing, so-called Christian thing. And I've come to understand that the church is a community, and that in the building of that community, there have been the adoption of sacred books. And some people need that community. Some people need that community. Some people are not open-minded enough to engage with other forms, other cultural forms, because religions are all cultural, incidentally. Other cultural forms of honoring the divine. Let's use the word the
Divine.
divine.
I like that.
And so when I pray in some contexts, just in my daily utterances, I talk about, you know, just mother, father, children, divine. The natural order of things is that we have mother and we have father and we have children. If you have mother, father, you must have children. So in some cases, it's the this kind of tripartite thing, mother, father, Holy Spirit kind of thing, or whatever it is. But in my own, this is something that I've adopted for myself. Nobody not tell me that. Me know that from inside of my own being. This is how I feel in my DNA that I must respond in the face of the power wars about spirituality. And I want to also refer back to the history, because nihilism, which was that catch-all word used to describe the spiritual practices, whether obia or otherwise, that they couldn't stamp out nihilism. They brought in the Christian missionaries to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And they
To
failed.
try.
They failed. And let's talk about the two religions in Jamaica that emerged in the last millennium: Rastafari and revivalism. And these two religions could not survive in a place like Jamaica, could not emerge unless there was a hearing, a sensibility already existing for this kind of religious excitement, or let's call it spiritual excitement or spiritual depth. And even with Christianity today, the overwhelming, the Jamaica is known to be the country with the most churches per square mile. As much as all of that exists, people are still very grounded at whatever level, deep or shallow, grounded in their African ways, not dispensing with their African ways. They are still talking about the dreams that they get. They're still talking about the visions that they get. They're still talking about the ways in which they're honoring their ancestors without even knowing.
Mm.
So it's a space I navigate by giving grace to everyone who needs the space of expression in the way that they've chosen. I'm very tolerant, in other words, to allow people where they are, to be where they are, to do as they please. I talk about the fact that there's just enough spiritual and emotional space in the world for everyone. If you
Yeah.
This is true.
want to learn and know what I am doing, come close,
This
but
is true.
I'm not going to proselytize and tell you that what I'm doing is what you must do.
This
I
is
think
true. Yeah.
what I've heard you say there, Sonjah, is there's the sense of religion and spirituality as fulfilling a basic human need for three things that I've heard is number one, community, right? That togetherness, which religion and spirituality provides, and Christianity has provided that, but also there is the potential within African traditions to provide community. Number two is identity, right? People often associate their religious beliefs with a sense of identity. I am Christian,
Yeah.
and I think there's another opportunity there within African communities to to forge a sense of identity that is rooted in a sense of African consciousness. And number three is a sense of awe. I think awe is an important part of spirituality and religion, right? A sense of wonder that we don't know everything, and there's a beauty in the divine that we are seeking access to. And I think that sense of awe also comes through in the music, in the drumming, in the veneration of our ancestors and that spiritual side. So I say that to say those three things: identity, community, and awe, which are parts of religion. I think there's an opportunity to see that we can tap into those drivers or mechanisms within a space of African consciousness, right? So in terms, to answer your question, Fiona, how can we maybe navigate this affiliation to Christianity as the doctrine? I think there is potential for identifying the mechanisms that Christianity feeds us with, identity, community, awe, among others. I'm not saying this is exhaustive. And seeing that those things can also be connected and satisfied through a sense of, now I'm going to use the word repair or reconnection to that identity which was lost during the transatlantic trafficking, right? And a reconnection to that sense of self and belonging and awe and connection to your ancestral lineage needs to be something that we come back to, and is central to this conversation of repair, which is why we're all here having this conversation in the first place.
Listen. The one crucial thing you're reminding me about is that the bodies have no contradiction in them. This is one of the things our ancestors taught us.
Sorry, can you
The same
clarify?
bodies.
The bodies, which bodies?
The bodies, human bodies, the human bodies. Our ancestors taught us that the same body that can go to carnival to gyrate is the same body that can go to church the next day for ashes. There is no contradiction in the body. It is the mind that has the contradiction and the guilt and the associated challenges around how it is we must celebrate and in what form that must happen. The bodies there's no contradiction in the body. It's the mind that's having a problem. So yeah, spirit. Listen, the separation that people have between what is spiritual and what is spiritual or sacred and what is secular and worldly. There is no separation. There's only balance.
I love this perspective. I'm leaning back in my chair because I'm digesting all of this as we go.
That is one that I have to sit and think about for a long time, but it's true. It's very,
because
very,
it's the
very, very,
same
very
creator.
true.
It's the same creator that gave us the capacity to do all of them.
Yeah.
And that creator, which I don't use gendered terms to describe, which is why I say mother, father, children, divine.
Can I ask a
I don't
question?
say Lord. I don't say none of those gender terms do I use anymore. So I've decolonized my mind in that respect.
I love that. I would just love to.
Go ahead,
Fiona,
Brian.
sorry.
I'll bring up my thing after. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to do a midway plug to say welcome everybody and just acknowledge everybody in the audience again. Thank you so much for being here for this scintillating conversation with Professor Sonjah Stanley from the Center for Reparation Research, and of course Fiona Compton from Know Your Caribbean, myself from the Repair Campaign, as we explore this week of repair, where we're asking you to support the calls for repair and stand in solidarity with reparations as we approach this very crucial, critical time in the reparations movement. We're asking everybody to sign in solidarity with the calls for repair. You can comment the word repair and we'll automatically direct message you the link to sign in solidarity. You can also find it in our bio at Repair Campaign. And again, this is not a race thing. It's not a country thing. I think it's important to emphasize this is a solidarity thing, which is from you recognize the ways in which the system that we've been talking about this whole conversation of chattel slavery, colonialism has disrupted a natural way of life and replaced it with something that is broken. From you can acknowledge that there is need for repair. You are welcome to stand in solidarity as we try to rally critical mass of people, Caribbean people, people in the diaspora, global Africa, around the world, to support the cause for reparations. Because there has been no justice for the over 350 years of exploitation that we've experienced in the Caribbean. And the legacies of that still live on, hence the need for repair. And that's what we're touching on in this conversation, how we can attempt to start the conversation around healing some of these legacies and what we can already do in ourselves and within our own communities to address these pressing needs for healing, reconnection, reparatory justice. So sign in solidarity. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Fiona. I hope you still have that train of thought. And I also have a question on the heels of that after. So back over to you, Miss Fifi.
No, the necessary, Brian, necessary. I actually just come back in from New Orleans from an African spirituality festival where people can come in to learn about the many different types of African spirituality for those who want to go down that journey. And I'm sure, Sonjah, through your work, that you've come across people who have come to thank you, probably cry, or say how your work has touched them in a certain way. And I experienced that on Sunday, and a woman came to me, and she became very emotional, and she was shouting, saying, "Thank you, Fiona, you don't realize what you're doing, and for the ancestors and so on." But her emotion was very, very strong. Now, I'm not feeling like it was for me. It was more in terms of what she was feeling. And in over that weekend, one of the speakers had said, the sadness you feel is not yours alone. So sometimes, so when I was speaking to a friend of mine and I was relaying what happened with the woman and like her emotion, he said, I bet you she would not remember all of that because it was not her that was speaking alone. And it started to make me think about when we talk about when we talk about triggers, things that trigger us, and that our sadness is not just Fiona's sadness, Brian's sadness, Sonjah's sadness. Is sadness from them. But then it also made me think, what about joy? Some of the things that make me happy is not just my happiness, you know? And that's what so when we're talking about the I guess being the awareness of the things that we feel, and I think it's following our feelings, following our emotions, following why is this thing hurting me so much? Why
So,
is this
so
thing filling my heart so much? And then looking into that and thinking, reflecting on it, and then opening yourself up to listen. So that was just my little train of
so you
thought
you
there.
see how them remind you if you come back to that, because I was gonna say that earlier. Exactly
Mm,
what you just said. When you
right.
asked me the question about whether I've been in spaces and just feeling a particular way, responding a particular way, the first thing that came to my mind to respond to you to say was, I often feel such sadness from my ancestors who are not able to express but through me in this time. Tears. Let me
Boy,
tell you, tears.
boy,
Okay?
boy. That you
Yeah.
are the vessel. You are that vessel
Yes.
for them.
And
That voice
I
for
and I, I
them.
was what came to my mind a while ago was to just say, you're a real Obey woman in a Fiona, because you bring that back up for me for affisate, right? Cause them say you affisate.
Mm,
Okay. So it is that understanding that we are not simply the consciousness that we think we are in these bodies in this time, and that we are connected to our ancestors immediately, but also to the very minute elements of the entire universe all at the same time,
mhm.
Hmm.
is something most of us cannot comprehend.
Yeah.
And if we comprehend it, we do not embody that understanding every day as we walk the planet.
Yeah.
So it means that I can express in this time any emotion, any performative or aesthetic choice of any of my ancestors. When I met my husband, One of the things he said to me was, there are 5 people who walk with you.
Ooh.
And
Mm.
you just have to know that you are not walking the planet alone.
Mm.
You just have to know that.
Mm.
You just have to know that. So those 3 people, when you looked behind you or felt them behind you, those people were connected to you, Fiona. They were connected
I know that.
to you.
Mm. I know. I feel like those three, because I think sometimes I feel like different ones are walking with me at different experiences, and those three particularly gave me carnival. Right, those 3 parts, if
Mm.
they whether they were, it was something that they were musicians that were not able to express themselves in a way that they wanted to, maybe that they did, but those 3 in particular gave me my love for carnival, and they wanted to be there with me on that day. And it was
Wow.
it was really beautiful for me to be able to recognize and then put my hands out and hold. And I think sometimes it's good to do the physical thing. So like when you're talking about the shawl, right? I'm sure you took that shawl in your hand for a minute and looked at it and felt it and felt
Yes,
the
man.
the fibers of the fabric, and just you didn't just fling the shawl on you and go and do the top. It
No,
You
I
looked
just
at that shawl and
look
it
at it
completely
properly.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all of
Yeah.
those moments are moments of remembering and honoring, I'd say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the pause. It's the pause. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it's it's the moving through the day, moving through each day with an understanding that they are right here with us.
I would say
Yeah.
Hollywood 419 says, I feel like I don't have anyone. I haven't been that close or attached to anyone in my family. But I think what I would say to that is we don't have to, many of us don't have great relationships with family members. Some of us don't know our families at all. But that doesn't mean that there's not somebody there with you. You know
Yeah.
that you have a lineage. And you know what? Yes, there are some people in our family, living or dead, that we don't have the best relationships with. But there are people there who love you and who are walking with
Yes.
you. Your
Yes.
laughter, it comes from somebody. Your joy
Yes.
comes from
Yeah.
somebody. Your love of certain things, if it's breadfruit planting, whatever, come from somebody. There's certain dance that you love so much come from somebody. Whether you knew them or not, or had a good relationship with them or not, they are definitely there. And I
Yeah.
think it's just, you may not know, okay, that's my great granny and she was this and whatever, but you have to follow your emotion. And you will know it though. You will feel it. There's certain things that you will
Yes.
just feel that you cannot explain. And to me, that's them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that, Fiona. Like, I know that you're responding to the person in the comment there, but I just want to say that speaks to me deeply as well, in this idea that that even if you don't know them, they're there. I think of
Mm,
the I used to teach math, right? I didn't say I was good at math, but I used to teach math, and I think of every generation that you go back up, there are an extra times two number of people whose genes had to recombine to create
mm-hmm,
you, right?
mm-hmm,
So you have two parents. Each of those parents had another two parents. So if you do math, 2 to the power whatever generation you're at.
mm-hmm,
So 5 generations ago, and I think 5 generations ago would have been during when chattel slavery would be going
mm-hmm,
on in Jamaica, or depending on how we define a generation. For me, or for everyone, there would be 32 people
yeah.
whose genes have now recombined to create you. And I
Mm,
often think, even though I might not know who these people are, I like to, it's a thought experiment. Who who would these 32 people have been? And in
yeah.
what ways am I just not even realizing it? Am I similar, or do I
An
have
expression of
attributes,
them.
an expression of them? I look at my
Mm-hmm.
own nieces and nephews. I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, 8 of them, privileged. They're such a joy. And I see bits of myself in them, and I had nothing to do with them being there,
Hmm.
right? But I see you have my laugh, or you have my eyes, you have my introverted nature, you have my natural inclination to rhythm and music. And I think that's so powerful to think of how, as you said, even if we don't know them, we are connected to them and
Mm.
expressions of them in our very being. So thank you for whoever asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Hollywood
happened with
419.
a friend of mine. She reunited with her cousin that she hadn't seen in 30 years, so not since they were little children. And she said it is uncanny how they are exactly the same person.
Yeah.
Same personality, laugh the same a sense of humor, same like the way they dress, everything. And she was freaking out over the weekend. She said, "But we barely have spoken in these past 30 years, have not seen each other. I think it's like 35 years." And that, and again, is testament to like what you're saying, Brian, in terms of we have this connectivity whether we're aware of it or not.
How can
Yeah.
we escape the genetic coding? We can't really.
It is you.
And
Yeah. I mean, maybe you can nature versus nurture. Maybe there is some nurture that can help to supplement it and add to it, but
Right.
it's
But the
you.
genetic coding is definitely the
we'll always
wiring.
be there. We'll always
Wow.
be there.
Yeah.
I am loving this conversation, I must
Me
say.
too.
And again, thank you for everybody for joining and for being here. Remember to sign in solidarity because we're calling for reparations. And I kind of want to bring us home a little bit as we
Mhm.
connect the dots here. We've spoken about how we can honor our ancestors in practical ways by listening, in the choices that we make, in the way that we use music and rhythm and spirituality and clothing and food and laughter and so many ways.
Mhm.
Um, and now I would love to bring the conversation to a place of, um, in light of all of these natural expressions, right? How do we connect this with repair? How do we connect this with justice? With the idea
Mhm.
that in honoring them in our everyday lives, which is something that is an ongoing act of our own healing, right? Um, how do we channel that energy in solidarity, as we talk about, reparations, in amongst ourselves as people who identify with this, process of reconnecting with self and reparation, but also as we now move to bridge the conversation to people, um, who might not have the same lived experience. Let me be specific and not mince my words. Former colonial countries, people who, whose experiences are different and don't understand the concept of what it means to have been coming from a context of enslavement. Um, that's a broad question. What I really want to boil it down to is how do we honor our ancestors in
Hmm.
seeking repair.
So your
So,
next
I
book.
mean, one practical example I can share is, just staying with that celebration theme for a moment. If it is that we know that a fundamental part of life to maintain wellness is to celebrate from life to death, birth, death, marriage, all of the things that we engage in life. It means that space must be made for celebration and
Mhm.
not constantly finding a corner on the street to string up a sound system, being approached by the police every time to lock down the dance. It
Mhm.
means that for repair, we must be considering ways in which to make space for entertainment since it's fundamental to life. So, one of the things I've advocated for is entertainment zones. Why don't we have entertainment zones in
Mhm.
which you can go from morning till night?
Mhm.
Trinidad, for example, is much more advanced than Jamaica. Carnival does not get interrupted by anything. The country
Mhm.
is on holiday.
Mm,
So, what is it that doesn't allow us in 2025 to make space for the kind of entertainment that our people need
Mhm.
and want? And people come to Jamaica, for example, people go to Trinidad for this kind of entertainment. That's what we are known for. That's what we are known for. So practically, repair can be in the form of, I mean, certainly that's internal now, ways in which we make space for each other and not criminalize each other on the basis of the very fundamental things that we need to live and be well.
Mhm.
I think a second thing, so beyond policy and legislative transformation and so on, you know, we must look in a larger sense at the very laws that constrict us. So beyond night noise or noise abatement, to what extent do we still need an OBIA law? To what extent do we still need the lunacy law,
Mhm.
the laws of assembly? Those things are have been avenues through which to criminalize people.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2025, we must take the example of Rwanda and repeal the colonial laws that no longer serve us. What's stopping us from doing that? So repair is at the internal level as well as the external level. I think we must also, in terms of repair, stop thinking about aid as something important for our countries from external sources. We must, in fact, in a conversation about repair, advance ways in which those funds must be seen as developmental. So I
Mm-hmm.
go back to the CARICOM 10-point plan. It's a development plan. It's a plan that seeks to address issues of national and regional
Right.
development.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we have to get our thoughts straight on what repair looks like. So at a structural and institutional level, we must do the hard work, not just the aesthetic work of talking about constitutional reform, but we must get it done. We must get it done and repeal the laws that no longer serve our people.
Absolutely.
There was the Dina had shared a post about Junkanoo around Christmas time, and it's one of the heads of the Junkanoo said that it's dying because people think it's weird. And as if he went to help. So I got in touch with the man, the thing we were talking, and he was saying that they have this law that Junkanoo perform, you only allowed a certain amount of Junkanoo performances a year. And I'm like, what do you mean it's 2025? What are you talking about? And he said,
Really?
yes. I'm like, yes. I'm like, Junkanoo, which is this fundamentally African thing that has been in Jamaica since what, the 1700s, right? So you could say it's one of the oldest examples of African celebration,
Yes.
and it and done so in out of resistance, rebellion, and all of that. And you mean to tell me they have laws to stifle it, so you can only allow to perform it a certain amount of times um, a year? And that was mind blowing to me. So when you
Ludicrous.
talking, yeah, so when you talk about the laws, things like that, I
Hmm.
think are really important. Like in Saint Lucia too, we have a hair policy that um boys who have afro hair, well, boys are only allowed a certain length of hair. Girls cannot have their afros out, all of these things. But of course, if you have straight hair and you're a boy, you can grow it as long as you want, and how in looking at all of those things, um the laws, like you were saying, starting off with our archaic colonial laws first and foremost. Definitely, we have to get rid of that. I think in terms of the CARICOM 10-point plan, and we think about ancestors, right? Let's look at certain things like the slave codes. So we've seen there are many slave codes, and it was all of these laws that were in clear English, French, whatever. Cannot do this, you
Hmm.
cannot do that. If this thing happened, this is what's going to happen to you, and so on. Some of these laws included that enslaved people not allowed to read or write. Okay, so when we're looking at
Hmm.
the 10-point plan in terms of education, when we want to think about what our ancestors' wildest dreams would be, what they would want for their descendants in terms of education, so all of that is part of the 10-point plan. So when you look at the applicable things of things that they were not allowed to do, and the power that we can regain back, right? When
That's
we
it.
look at when we're talking about our health and wellness, and the fact that they were on very high salt and sugar diets, and this is not why 60% of Caribbean households have heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, all of the above, right? These are things that we inherited through this legacy. So the injection of looking into developing our healthcare systems, you know, doing that research, these are the things our ancestors would have wanted for us. So when you break down the 10-point plan, right? All of those things are things that they would have wanted for their descendants.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So if we're talking about honoring them, it is honoring their dreams they would have had for their children, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren, and applying that. So to me, that's why this is repair and this is remembrance.
And
Fantastic.
let me just add that the human beings on the planet don't want different things. And
Yeah.
I've
Mm,
been looking, for example, at Maslow's hierarchy of
Mm.
needs.
mm,
Self actualization at the apex of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What does that mean for African people? What does that mean for African descended people? What does self-actualization mean? Sometimes it is just to be able to have a vacation and not work for a week. Some people don't have that, you know? And I think about the ways in which we must understand for ourselves what that word repair means. We must take, time to reflect on what repair really means.
On a personal level.
Yeah.
Even as we build to the societal level, on a personal level is where I think all social movements that we're talking about, the movement of repair, we're implying mass movement of groups of people. But before we even get to the level of social psychology, we have to understand individual psychology. I think is what you're touching on.
Absolutely.
Here. I studied psychology in school. Social psychology was my degree, so
I did a little
particularly
bit of
interested in this idea that the individual psychology lies upstream from group psychology. And in that self-actualization process, Fiona, I loved what you said there about how the 10-point plan is a template for the things that were systematically denied our ancestors and that we can work towards in this day and age as we practice a little bit of that Sankofa mentality, right? Looking back looking back to get as we look forward into this new era, this new second decade of people of African descent, which has been approved and granted. How can we make the most of that? I think requires an element of this Sankofa, looking back and honoring, venerating the things that were denied our ancestors, and say, in light of this, we owe it to them. And let me not put words in your mouth now, Fiona, but in my opinion, looking back at these structures that were put in place to dehumanize and deny the people that we embody now, how can we learn from that and remember them in our fight for justice and in our fight for building a better version of the world, of the Caribbean, of global Africa that we want to see, that they would want to see, that maybe we haven't even embodied yet, but we are on our way towards building in this intergenerational battle, in this intergenerational struggle for repair.
All of that. I think like you both are saying, it has to start on an individual level, then a community level, then a country level, and a regional level. It has to go in all the tiers. But unless you do the foundation of the inner work first, then you cannot do the rest. Because it won't work, because the colonial mindsets will just creep in. So even me doing all my years of history, and they're like, I don't deserve joy. I'm gonna die just now because there's no way like I can have happiness.
Deserve this amount of joy. Yes, we do. and hello, this is enshrined in even the Proverbs, Chicken and Mary Hawk the near. There's always something telling us, don't bother enjoy yourself too much, because the more you enjoy yourself, something will be there to cut off the enjoyment. It's enshrined in the ways in which our, just even that's kind of coming down from our ancestors too. And we need to be able to say to ourselves, no, but we deserve it.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I've never even thought of that proverb there before.
Yes, ma'am.
I think if just to engage the audience again, right? Everybody who's here, firstly, thank you for being here. If you're resonating with this, we want to hear from you. Comment repair if you are resonating with any of this, so we can just see that it's not just the three of us, vigorously agreeing with each other, but that we are actually connecting with real human beings on the other side of this. As we talk about this individual process of repair, like, is this something that you are? I would love if you could comment something that you are taking from this conversation as you continue commenting repair, just so that we can see as we look back and summarize and say, we actually reached some people and have contributed to this mental decolonization that is necessary to catalyze a social movement, to catalyze the greatest political tide of the 21st century, as Professor Sir Hilary Beckles refers to this reparations movement. And as
it's our only job right now.
Absolutely.
It's our only job.
So
I want to ask you two lovely ladies if you have any last. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
This might be a hard one. But in your many readings, in your research and so on, what have been some of the things that you've read that have really illuminated you, that have felt like a piece of your puzzle has coming together when you like, oh, this makes complete sense. As in, this is why I am the way I am, or this is why I feel the way that I feel.
Mm.
In some of your research that you just uncovered about our ancestors and things that they have done, you know, like um for me, I'll give like a small example. It was there was one where you're talking about how planting was, they said the planting works in the plantations were always depleted because planting was such like a love thing. Like they never had
I was
before.
there. I was right there.
Yes, I was like, okay, yeah, it's, you know, so and the things like that really, filled me up. So I don't know if you had any ones that stood out to you.
Oh gosh, there's so many of them though. And
Mm,
I want to, just in keeping with my own work and my own research, one of the important things that really blew my mind was the similarity. Well, what I got from Leroy Jones, now changed his name to Amiri Baraka, globally recognized poet, writer. He actually read from his work at our own very literary festival here in Jamaica, Calabash.
mhm,
Amiri Baraka, and there's a poem I quote from him in my book, Dance Hall from Slave Ship to Ghetto, which talks about the bones at the bottom of the Atlantic, a railroad of human bones. But in that book on blues people, so the Railroad of Human Bones is another, is from a different book. But
mhm,
Blues People is the book he wrote, which came to my attention. I remember, God rest his soul, Agri Brown, Professor Agri Brown said to me, "Oh, you've got to read Blues People." And that book showed me, I mean, I spent a whole 3 4 days just imbibing everything in that book. And it was a similarity, what I talk
mm,
about as the common genealogies across the experiences of celebration in Black Atlantic.
mm,
And that to me was, you imagine they're in Haiti, they're in Trinidad, they're in New Orleans, they're in Jamaica, in Cuba, in Brazil. It's the same
mm,
African diasporan person.
mhm,
Okay?
mhm,
It's the
mhm.
same. And we just don't know. There are language differences. There are all kinds of things that keep us thinking we're different people, but we're the same people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I can
It's
I can recommend that book to people who are listening. Go find blues people and read it.
yes, yes. Someone has put it in the comments as well, which is great. I think one of just to add to, because we're talking about dance and when you're saying from safe shifts to dance or to the ghetto,
The ghetto,
when
yeah.
you know Edward Long, and Edward Long
Yes.
said he wrote a lot, and of course he's somebody to hate, but something he wrote. He said Negro women are basically. I'm paraphrasing, but he said they're so ridiculous. They cannot walk without moving their hips in this ridiculous manner. Whatever. I
I
say, okay,
remember
so
seeing that. Yeah.
we've been walking and whining, and so when we're talking about even just how we walk, how you walk every single day, how Caribbean women walk. Okay, this is something. This is an ancestral walk that you are walking in, the way. This our relationship with our bodies that we may not even be aware of. Every time you're walking on the road, you are walking as your ancestors did. So
That's
just a
what
nice
Kamal
thought to
Brathwaite
think of.
says. That's what
Mm,
Kamal Brathwaite says. He says every time we are dancing on the dance floors of Kingston or Trinidad or
mm,
wherever, we are dancing in a ritual in memory of our ancestors.
mm.
The same thing when we're
Exactly that.
walking,
Yes, exactly that. Exactly.
talking, celebrating,
Laughing, all
you
of it.
laughing.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, man.
Wow.
Sorry, you're coming to say something. I had interjected.
I don't remember what I was going to say. I mean, sir, I think you've done an excellent job of what of highlighting, summarizing what we've been saying through this conversation, which is that in every facet of our daily lives, there are opportunities to remember our ancestors and to honor the ways that they live on through us. I think that's sort of the summary statement of everything that we've talked about here. And we've gone into different chapters here in how, music and dress and spirituality and community, all of those ways, food, are expressions of us honoring our ancestors. And I think that's been particularly resonant with me. And I want to say a personal thank you to both of you for blessing us with this wealth of knowledge. And it's not just knowledge, it's experience. It's community in gathering together, even just the three of us and the several hundreds of us that have come through on the Instagram live here. Right? It's being in community together that's gonna move the needle. And so that's something that I just want to re-emphasize, that for that person who's saying, I feel alone in this, like, let's not feel alone. Let's tap into the communities. Let us activate on a local and regional level, on a national level and international level, to have more conversations like these within our families, our churches and spaces, our third spaces.
Find the tribe.
Yeah.
Find the community.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can ask the universe to give you what you need. That's another thing that my ancestors taught me, You can
speak on it.
Ask for what you need. If the community is what you need, ask for the community. It will show up. You'll be guided to that community.
I can testify to that for sure. I think in the journey of research or whatever, then you start to say, oh, I like this person, I like what they're doing, and then you just end up connecting with them somewhere, and then you end up connecting with someone else. You're like, wow, like, you're amazing, oh my god, I love what you do. And then you start and like you do the, and it just comes to you.
So but look at me and you, Fiona.
Exactly. It's like we know each other a long time. Exactly.
Yep. It was just a matter of time before we got into a conversation.
It was.
And look at the synergies, all of the overlaps, and the ways that your spirit just tick, how you saying.
Yeah, man. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah, that's your ancestors taking on to each other as well. Fiona is frozen. Yep. But as she comes back in, I think this is just, I realized that we've been having a conversation for almost an hour and a half. It doesn't feel like that at all.
And I'm still at work.
Are you really? Oh, wow.
Yes.
Well, it's really good. Fiona has frozen and fallen off, but maybe she'll come back in just a moment. But Prof, is there anything that you want to plug as we have the opportunity, as we wind down this conversation this evening, that you want to let our audience know about?
So in just resonating again with that point about community, we can tap into the work of the Repair campaign, tap into the work of the Center for Reparation Research. Those are ways in which we are honoring our ancestors by demanding reparation for them and their descendants. And we have, of course, in the last few weeks been really getting ahead with our international reparation debate competition. Our young people in our secondary schools all across the Caribbean have been really engaged and been showing that they too are inside of this fight. They too are inside of this movement, and that they have a place in this movement for the future to be a brighter one for people.
Yeah.
So tune in to the Center for Reparation Research's International Reparation Debate Competition. We're streaming on the Repair Campaign's Instagram page, and we're also streaming on our YouTube page. So, that's something to tune into.
At the Center for Reparation Research, yes, on YouTube, which actually takes place this Thursday and Friday. Round two takes place.
Of the debate.
So definitely tune into that. And Fiona, welcome back. We were just saying, is there anything that you want to leave us with, anything that you want to plug or let us know is happening that we need to plug into?
Well, first of all, thank you for an amazing conversation. You all have
I
really
do.
energized me. It has been a really, and to see all the comments and to see people who are really on board with everything. I think it's just reparations. Of course, this is an uphill fight. A lot of us feel defeated, deflated, and like, what happened? They go this or whatever. No matter what, I think it's just about remembering. And another great speaker, Mama Coco, said, it is remember to remember. And I think that's all I can ask. That's the most I can ask. Your
Yep.
personal journey is yours, but just always remember to remember. I promise you, it will be the most fulfilling life experience you will have, because every day you're going to get this affirmation of who you are, what you come from, the many people, the 32 people, 62 people, 164 people who make you, all of their DNAs in you, and just to have those moments of remembrance. And from how you walk to how you like to fry your plantain, your favorite dancehall song, what you like to bend over, wind up your body, all of those things are
Yeah.
remembering. And everything that you do, everything that's part of you comes from them. And then we just continue this journey. Let's fight on as a community. The community is out there. I feel so encouraged. I encourage you all to have a look at the reparations debate, see all the young people doing their thing.
Yeah.
Don't think there are not young people. Oh, young people don't care. They do. There are lots of amazing young people who are so invested in this cause, and they would love your support. So I just want to encourage us to stick with each other and not to lose hope, and just to continue to remember to remember.
Powerful.
Ashe.
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 Remember to
Remember to
remember.
remember.
Mm,
Absolutely.
mm,
I want to talk about action as well, just to piggyback on that last point, which is as we
mm.
remember, and Prof, as you mentioned, community. I want to encourage everybody who is tuned in that as you go about remembering and as you plug into communities, let us orient ourselves towards action,
Action.
towards the action of repair, both internal repair and the advocating for repair on an international stage. I'm not sure if people know that there is a reparations movement,
Mm.
that there are activists and there are thought leaders that are organizing in communities in remembrance of to pursue justice for our ancestors. And I really want to encourage everybody who has benefited from this conversation this evening to connect with us, right? This is, look, we could care less the number of followers or whatever, but what we really want
Mhm.
is to connect with you. So if you've tuned into this conversation, follow all three of our pages here, because we want to continue this action as the reparations movement continues. We want to plug into the spaces that you are in, the ways that we can tap into your
Absolutely.
communities to get this message into the communities that your communities have community with. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
Hmm.
that this message of repair, connection,
Can
healing
spread
can
Mm-hmm.
like a
spread.
virus.
That's the only way we're going to be successful in this, is if we all unite in solidarity. So if you've resonated, please remember to follow Repair Campaign follow at Culture Doctor, follow at Know Your Caribbean, and send us a DM. I love getting DMs from people saying, "I volunteer,
Yes.
I stand in solidarity." Like we definitely want you to sign in solidarity by commenting repair and getting that sent directly to you. But send us a DM and say we resonated with the conversation, so we can see, you're a real human being and not just a number on a screen, right? So we
Yeah.
can connect with you and actually lean into how we can be active in solidarity together. So those are my last thoughts there. um
Ashe. Mhm.
Ashe, indeed.
Blessings to everybody. Ashe. Yes.
I think it would be lovely to end with a moment of silence. What do you think? As we have this
Absolutely.
Let's
this
go.
date of remembrance of our ancestors and what that means. If you've benefited from this conversation, even if it's a little bit awkward joining our Instagram live and nobody's talking, who cares? Let's have a moment of silence as we remember everything that we've talked about today and set an intention for what that looks like as we come off of this, as we move into tomorrow, and as we remember to remember. So let's just pause for a minute or so. Remember to remember are the words that are in my mind.
A little water for the journey.
What was that like for you both to feel that sense of being embodied?
I was thinking about the little things, like I saw someone of them touching their nose, and that's my nose. I saw a mother combing her daughter's hair that have the same hair that I have. I saw laughter. I saw pain. I saw humanity. I saw not just myself, but I just saw human experience. I saw people in love. I saw little children playing. I saw somebody on a bed crying. I saw lots of different things. And just remembering that they were humans with feelings, emotions, dreams. A lot of the things I feel now, they feel. And so that's what happened in that moment for me.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. For me, it was just remembering a little water for the journey, you know? And that, yeah, every now and again, pour some libation for your ancestors. In acknowledgement of their presence around you, even when you can't see them.
Yeah. Yeah. This feels like a very powerful note for us to conclude on. One that is very sober-minded. You know, in as we've explored the intellectual side through this whole conversation, I think grounding it again in my body felt like a fitting way to conclude, as we've been talking about how this legacy lives on in our bodies, and how as we move our bodies through space, we can be mindful of remembering them. So all that to say, just to end on a moment of gratitude, just gratitude. That's the feeling that I'm embodying right now.
The feeling
Wow.
Absolutely.
of gratitude is the same.
Thank you
Thank you
guys that I got
so
to share this
much.
moment with you.
Yes.
This was really
Same
special,
here.
and I'm so glad that we
Yes.
got to share this with everybody else too. Let's have more of this.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been very, 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 very much a blessing.
Big time.
Absolutely.
And as you
Likewise.
said earlier, Brian, you know, we won't know the impact that this will have on anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Wishing everybody a good rest of your evening. And let's
Yes.
keep in touch. Remember, send us a DM, let's connect and comment repair, get that signature of solidarity. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you
Um,
everyone for being here.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. All right, everybody. Good to have you. Let's keep in touch.
All right. Have a
Thank you
good
so
night,
much for
Blessings.
being here.
everybody. Good night,
Have a good
Sonjah.
Good
night.
Thank you so
night.
much
Blessings.
again.
Bye
All
See
bye.
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bless you.
All right.